Good morning. Welcome to Rising. We have another great show for you today. Brianna, what's going on?
Well, our panel weighs in on why Trump stoners are chipping into a Ron DeSantis PAC. Plus, we'll discuss how the war in Ukraine is creating a global food shortage with writer Lee Harris. But first, as the nation grapples with the tragedy at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, Congress is gridlocked over a gun control package.
Talk started 2 weeks ago, and though 20 Senate Republicans support the framework for a pending legislation, they're facing major pressure from gun advocates and opponents of the bill. According to Punchbowl, the bipartisan group of senators working on the bill are expected to file it today. So will a gun control bill pass? The Hill's congressional reporter Mike Lillis and political reporter Julia Manchester join us now to discuss further. Welcome to you both.
Thank you. Good morning.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So, Julia, what do you think is the likelihood that this thing ever becomes law?
It's quite possible. We know that there is Republican support for this right now. I think we're going to have to see more details of the legislation that could potentially impact Republican support, since we know that this is an outline of what could be a proposed outline of what could be the legislation. However, I think it's remarkable the pressure that Republicans are facing from their bases, in particular John Cornyn from Texas, the lead Republican on this in the Senate. He was at the Texas GOP convention over the weekend, and he faced quite a bit of boos, when he was talking about the legislation, with people calling him a traitor and such. So, it's unclear at this point what will happen. I think it's, we are making progress, more so than we have before. But Cornyn and I would say other Republicans are definitely under a lot of pressure from the pro-Second Amendment wing of the party that sees this as essentially caving, even though it's ironic because Democrats would say that this doesn't necessarily go far enough.
Julia, is there any residual pressure from folks that are concerned about school shootings and are particularly, kind of horrified by the events in Uvalde?
I think absolutely there's definitely that pressure, and you're seeing that on both sides. And I think it's reflected in the proposed legislation. So for Democrats, they think this is supposed to be solved through gun control and restricting gun access, or putting more restrictions on gun access. However, when you talk to Republicans and how they feel about this issue, it's all about the issue of public safety and school safety, and really upping that in the wake of these school shootings. I think you see both of those aspects reflected in this, maybe a little heavier of a lean on the school safety or public safety portion of this, but absolutely. I think right now, Uvalde seemed to have really signaled a breaking point, I think, in how this country has responded to gun violence. However, this isn't the first time we've had a horrific school shooting, and it seemed like there was going to be progress, but ultimately nothing was done.
Well, that's what frequently happens when there is a really horrific mass shooting. Then there's a brief period of heightened public interest in doing something, anything, regardless of if it's enough or would have actually worked in that case. And then that kind of momentum seems to fade in the past. Mike, I want to get you in on this. So, what are you seeing on that front?
You're exactly right. The timing is so important here because exactly of what you said. The headlines are going to change. Something else is going to come up. There's going to be another issue, another tragedy. The attention span of the public, the media, of all of us, we're all complicit in this, tends to be very short. And after Newtown, after the Sandy Hook massacre in 2012, everybody was on board with some sort of reform. John Boehner said, we'll take a look at it. It was the Pat Toomey, Joe Manchin background check bill, if you recall. And what happened was that was in the middle of December. It was right before the Christmas holidays. And President Obama at the time, everybody just wanted to get out of town. There was an urgency, but there was also the holiday coming up. And instead of putting these things on the floor immediately, what he did was created a task force, and it was headed by none other than Vice President Joe Biden. So Biden knows exactly what he wants to do. He's been on this issue for many, many years. But because of that delay, by the time it hit the floor in 2013, it didn't pass the Senate. And then Boehner didn't have a reason to take it up in the House because it hadn't passed the Senate. So the urgency that you're seeing right now is for all of those reasons, because of the attention span of the media and all of us that they want to get it done before this 2-week July recess, and that means this week. And so we're going to see what the bill looks like today, but time is of the essence, and they all know that.
Well, Punchbowl News reports that gun control negotiations are getting hung up on abortion. As Washington braces for a potential Supreme Court ruling on abortion rights, Republicans are reportedly not wanting any funding from gun control to be used to pay for abortions. As the Senate rushes to get this legislation through ahead of the 2-week recess, as you mentioned, starting Friday. This comes as justices are ready to end their term with a blockbuster docket. Julia, what can you tell us about these upcoming SCOTUS decisions?
Look, I mean, I think the one we're obviously most closely paying attention to is Roe v. Wade and the fate of Roe v. Wade. And, according to that draft opinion that was leaked, or draft decision that was leaked a few months ago, it would appear that the court is very much on track to overturn Roe v. Wade and punt this back to the states. And we've seen that, subsequent stories sort of coming out of this big story of the draft memo have really overtaken Washington, including some of the death threats that have been made against justices, including Justice Brett Kavanaugh. We've seen conservatives very much voice a lot of concern about that and talk about that quite a bit. So it's going to be very much of a blockbuster week, and we can't ignore the fact that this is obviously happening right before the midterm elections, about 5 months or less than 5 months before the. So it's something we're very much paying close attention to, because we know that whatever side comes out on top in this decision, I think both sides are going to use this as a galvanizing mechanism in the midterms, especially Democrats, who are going to be very much leaning into this issue of Supreme Court justices, Supreme Court decisions when it comes to the race for the Senate.
Absolutely, Mike. Do you think a Roe decision, or Dobbs decision, is that just going to shut down all activity on the Hill anyway? This is just going to reorient our politics toward dealing with the fallout of this, and then that might exactly be the thing that pushes gun control out of the headlines.
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, it will certainly become an explosive campaign issue, as Julia just mentioned. Everybody's going to go back to their district and either cheer it or attack it, whatever the decision is. Obviously, we don't know what the final look is going to be. We've seen the draft, but not the final decision. But it will be a midterm issue, but not necessarily a legislative issue on Capitol Hill. The House, Nancy Pelosi, the Democrats have already passed their bill that would codify Roe, that would entrench those protections into law. But of course, the Senate is not going to pass that. So as a legislative issue, it doesn't really resound, and that will give the gun reformers the space to still push those talks. Again, understanding that the urgency is still there, and that they're going to have to do something very quickly, because we're going to be in August recess really soon. But no, I don't think that a Roe decision, as explosive as it might be, would change the politics on Capitol Hill in terms of everything else that they're trying to do. They still have to fund the government. Roe versus Wade is not going to change the urgency to get something done there. They don't want to shut down before the midterms, because both parties would get beat up. So, there's legislation that what they will, and, they have to pass, and they will pass, and Roe is not going to get in the way of that. Whether gun reform is on that list has yet to be seen.
Well, Julia and Mike, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it anytime.
And we'll have more Rising right after this.